And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. If you want to learn anything else about today's speakers, we have included a link in the chat with their full bios. So first we have Bilal Baig. Bilal is a queer, trans feminine, Muslim writer, performer, and workshop facilitator, and is the co-creator and lead of the upcoming CBC series, Sort of. Bilal is a core team member at nonprofits such as Story Planet and Rivers of Hope, where they develop and facilitate workshops for youth in under-resourced neighborhoods in Toronto focused on creative writing and literacy and combating Islamophobia through the arts. Welcome, Bilal. Next, we have Melanie Nepinak Hadley, a program director at WarnerMedia Access. Melanie has worked in programming in 2 national broadcasters in Canada, received thousands of pitches, and overseen dozens of projects in development. She's actively connecting talent to opportunity and diversifying and deepening the pool of storytellers working in Canada. In her current role at WarnerMedia, she's focused on above-the-line talent initiatives. Next is Nathalie Younglai. TV writer and director Nathalie Younglai founded BIPOC TV and Film to advocate for meaningful representation in front of and behind the camera. She is the recipient of the 2020 CSA Humanitarian Award, the WGC Alex Barris Mentorship Award, and is one of Now Magazine's 2020 Trailblazers. Nathalie is currently showrunning a web series that she co-created with Simu Liu and is writer and supervising producer on CBC's Coroner. Welcome, Nathalie. Next up is Penny E. Gummerson, a writer and executive producer. Penny is a Métis writer who recently won the WGC Award for Best Writing Drama Series for Trickster. She's also nominated for 2 2021 Canadian Screen Awards for Best Writing Drama Series for Cardinal and for Trickster, and her plays have been produced across Canada. She's currently writing a feature film based on the memoir Up Ghost River. We also have Vivian Lin. Vivian is a writer and producer whose credits include Hudson and Rex, Killjoys, Carter, Bajillionaires, and Daytime Emmy-nominated Holly Hobbie. She's a recipient of the Telefilm New Voices Award and the Bronze Prize at the Page Awards, and has been nominated for a CSA and a Writers Guild of Canada Screenwriting Award. I'm going to pass it off to our moderator for this session, Amber-Sekowan Daniels. Amber's a mixed Anishinaabe Oji Cree screenwriter, comedian, and creator, and is a proud member of the Garden Hill First Nation. She was recently in the room on Digstown 3, and Amber's stand-up comedy has been featured in the Winnipeg Comedy Festival, Odd Block Comedy Festival, and on CBC's The Debaters. Totally stacked panel. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm going to hop right in with my first question, and it's a question about the writing process. And I just want to know, what kind of stories are you excited about right now, and where are you finding your inspiration? And let's start with Vivian.
Okay. Where am I finding inspiration? I'm currently in a writing room just with other people. I feel like I'm in a really diverse room right now. And you know, when you kind of shoot the shit and you tell, oh, am I allowed to swear? Oh yeah, this is gone south so quickly. But like, you know, when you're talking amongst yourselves and just telling stories, you get all of these wonderful, like, kind of, you know, stories that are not maybe necessarily great for the they're always great for the show, but they're not like right for the show, but there are all these like wonderful places and people and characters and perspectives that I don't usually see. And I think that comes from hearing just a diversity of different people and their experiences, and where, you know, where everyone's from and what their lives are like. So that, like, just, you know, I think I've spent a lot of time in mainstream, and I feel like these voices have been excluded for so long that it's just really entertaining and really exciting. So that's where I'm at these days. Should I take the next person? Do I get to?
Let's do that. No, I just set it up. Yeah.
Penny.
Awesome. Thank you, Vivian. Where am I finding inspiration? Well, I think I just find inspiration really from my friends and family. Always good for fodder. My crazy family. Love them to death, but they're nut bars and great storytellers. And they're afraid to talk to me anymore because they think it's going to end up on screen. So they're always saying, don't share that with anybody. And that's usually the gem. And just, you know, just the women that I walk with right now. I have a a circle of women before COVID. We just met and had a bit of a sharing circle, you know, with the smudge and feather, and now we're doing it on Zoom. But you know, they just share their stories, their life stories, and where they're at about mothering and going through careers and relationships and whatever's going on in their lives. And you know, some of it's tragic, but a lot of it is really funny, and they're really strong, amazing women, and they're always inspiring me. So that's, you know, between friends and family, I'm good for a while. The story. Oh, I'm gonna pick. Okay, Melanie.
Thanks, Penny. It's always good to see you. What a good little group here. I wish we were hanging out all day. Well, this is an interesting question because it very much highlights that I am the interloper in this group. I am not one of you brave souls that writes and takes off little chunks of my soul and just sends them out for people to devour. No, thank you. Very proud of you people for doing it. Amazing. But I think I can still answer this question from the position I am in, where it's like we're right now kind of going through all the applications for our writers program that we launched at the end of 2020. It's definitely been really interesting to see the level of talent that has come through. It's going to be tough for sure as we get into these final stages of selections. But one thing that I'm really noticing in reading all of these scripts is these little, for one, for sure, people are leaning towards nostalgia. I feel right now we're living in a time where people are like, what's familiar? What feels like something I've been into? It's not going to be a heavy lift to get into that story or to get into that space. But what I'm really noticing is I've reached this age where I have enough time to look back and have like memories, like I'm not a kid anymore sort of thing. So I have sort of earlier adulthood that's being captured in stories like this really specific time in the late 90s and early 2000s. Like there was just this really specific feel of like what we were all on the cusp of in terms of like being able to communicate with each other. And so seeing things like that in stories, I feel like it's kind of juicy because it feels like fertile territory in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm just sitting in this position in a way different situation than the rest of you. You guys are like looking for things to pluck to, I feel like, feed me or to feed a consumer, right? So I'm definitely coming at it from a different perspective. So I just want to put that giant asterisk on all of my answers right meow. So I think I'll hand it to Nathalie.
Thanks, Mel, and for making me feel old. I think I'm finding inspiration in like all the voices that are finally being heard and being able to tell our stories right now. It's so incredibly exciting. Also, I guess when I was listening to everyone, like some of my inspiration is from like friends and family, and a lot of it is also just from my anger. Just anger and emotions, and like using the writing as an outlet for that, and how to like spin that into a more palatable or maybe less palatable story, who knows. I'm gonna pass it over to Bilal.
Thanks. I think for me, I'm kind of, I don't know, because of the pandemic that we're in, I feel like I've tapped into, well, there's just been a lot of time to think and reflect, and I'm thinking a lot about myself as a child, and I was really, I mean, I still identify as super shy. This is incredibly difficult for me right now, even though it's Zoom, and thank God we're not in a room full of like thousands of people. But I was really observant as a kid and would never say anything, but would watch everything. And so I think lately, anytime I'm out in the world, again, not as often as I'd like to, but the world also is feeling a little bit quieter too, which is kind of nice. At least the areas I frequent, I'm not going to, underground COVID parties. And so to watch watch people and really watch them. I feel like that's giving me something. I don't know. I'm not writing right now, but I'm storing things in my brain for sure. And then it's similarly connected to the stories I'm drawn to too. I just, I watched The Assistant, The Assistant with Julia Garner, and quiet ass movie, like almost like nothing happens. But to me, it was like explosive. And so I don't know. And that's a new-ish kind of thing for me. So I'm leaning into that more, like finding these films that, and my roommate and my brother, they're like, nothing happened in that movie. What are you talking about? Why do you like it? But I don't know. I'm just drawn to, and okay, I'll shut up in just one more second. But I think that to connect it all, I also come from a super theater background, and I love the theater. It'll always be kind of present for me. But when you do quiet stuff in theater, as an audience member, I always fall asleep. But in film, it's just the total opposite. And so I'm falling in love with learning about that and where I'm at. Okay, I'm done now.
It's amazing. I love how I've instigated like a camp vibe with the with the passing the baton. So hope that's okay, but I was kind of digging it. So the next question, let's talk about the room. So of all the rooms you've been in, you've worked in, what were some of the things that were positive and that like were done right, I guess you could say. And I'm going to start with Nathalie on this one.
Yeah, I think the best room is really the coroner room. And I think one of the things that happened first day one really was Maureen Brebner, the showrunner, had said to us, we're going to be talking about difficult things and things will come up, and we're each our own people in the room, and if anything comes up, like, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to say, like, this offended me, this hurt me, or whatever, and we'll stop and address it. And if you don't feel comfortable talking in the room, you can come talk to me personally. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me, you can talk to the producer. Just kind of like went up the chain, which kind of set the tone for, like, it's okay to not be okay with how the conversation has gone or how the conversation is going. And then the second thing that was like really empowering or strong, that sent a really strong message, was that she didn't wait for those of us who were BIPOC or queer or whatever to say, like, this personally offended me. Like, sometimes she would catch it herself and she would be the one to like call it out in the room, or we'd take a break and she'd come back and be like, I'm sorry, I made a joke about this and it actually isn't funny and I shouldn't have done it, and I'm holding myself accountable. And I think that really kind of set the stage for, like, it was okay for any one of us to say, this character is going in a direction that I don't feel comfortable with. It's really playing into stereotypes, or like, we should think about the fact that we don't have representation on this side, and so if we're going to tell this kind of story, it's like, it's very unbalanced, and so then we could have like really deep conversations, and we still do, and I think that is like the most amazing thing, because by having those hard conversations about casting, about like colorism, like we get much deeper, and we can get deeper into the stories that we tell as well.
That's great. Penny, how about you? What are some things that you think worked well in some of the situations that you've been in?
What worked really well in Patrick Tarr's Cardinal room was taking Sweet Jesus ice cream breaks. That was awesome. Amazing. What's worked in a room? Well, I agree with Nathalie. I think it comes, the tone is set from the top down. So I think it always begins with the showrunner and comes down and filters down through the writers. And some things, it's about inclusivity and respect and having fun. I remember being on Arctic Air. That was in the beginning stages of my career, and Ian Weir was amazing. He just was a good man, and he was very respectful and inclusive and wanted to hear everybody's ideas, and he wasn't into shooting things down and making people feel little. he's just a very nice guy and a really amazing storyteller. And I think that for me, maybe spoiled me too, because it was a great room. And he took me under his wing. You know what, I guess this maybe is, I'm going off topic a little bit, but when it comes to new writers, right now, sometimes rooms are only 6 weeks long. It's not enough time to mentor a young writer. That's, you know, when I was on Arctic Air, I'd be there 8 months, and I was a part of the production meetings and the tone meetings and the prop meetings, and Ian would ask me, what do you want to learn about? And I'd say, well, I know nothing about editing. He said, well, let's go into the editing room. You know, I was on set. I learned all those things and was included in them. And so now I want to be able to share those things with other young writers coming up. But when we're in a room for 6 weeks, it's really tough to first break a story in a series, a whole season in 6 weeks. But what do you do, you know, with the young writers that are there that get sent away after 6 weeks and say, go write your story, you know? So I think I am going off topic. What worked in the room was just being respectful and having some fun and feeling safe to tell your stories, you know, and not being shot down or ridiculed for it. So. Oh, you're picking. I'm going to put it back to you, Amber.
No, you picked that. No, you were going to. You had it. Go for it.
Vivian, go for it.
Thanks, Vinny. There's what are some things? I think one of them, which is interesting, is now the conversation has moved beyond just getting like one of something to representation, but like two of something, which is or more. Oh my God. But like that's like really nice, because I feel like what I've seen is when that occurs and you're talking about a character and you're talking to these writers who can represent that culture and that background, and that you have such a richer conversation because you have diverse viewpoints within the people themselves, as you would, but sometimes you have to say obvious things because they might not be obvious, but you have richer. And then I also think, because this happens to me where I'm like, if I have a buddy in a room, then I will feel more empowered and more comfortable, because I know that not only am I gonna have like oh yeah, that is the case, like a yes and to what I'm saying, or who can verify, or if I'm wrong, or if there's a difference, there's really fertile conversation to be had about this character that we're talking about and why we think one thing or another. You're not like the pressure of being like me writing for Asian characters. I'm like, I don't know, maybe they're fourth generation, maybe they're like, you know, from another place, another province, another whatever. Like, I don't know what that is, but like I'll do all my research. But then there's no longer all of the pressure to represent in that way. And then one of the other things that I love to speak to a little bit of what like I think happens in the corner room is like we have a safe word in our room. So it's, I'll just tell you what our safe word is. It's bumper cars. So it's just bumper cars. And so if anyone says bumper cars, it's like I'm about to say something I don't know, or it's just like it's just we're encroaching on like bumper car territory. So like, can we slow down? Can we like take a minute? Can we like proceed with caution? Because I think there's just so much like there is a lot of uncertainty in how to communicate ideas really well. There's no rule book sometimes, and like as much as I check Twitter, like I'm not the most articulate person either. So sometimes you can either preface with a bumper car, this is just a preemptive one, or you know, if someone has said something and it is like a really scary time, if we've all agreed bumper car, that's it, we like stand down and like sort it out a little bit, then I find that it creates a safer place, and that's, you always just want a good discussion, so I think that helps. I will turn it over to Bilal.
Thanks so much. I just kind of want to echo what's being said. I know I've only been in one room, which was also one that I co-show ran with Fab Filippa, who's my partner on sort of. And I think for us, there was just a real effort to make sure that there was space for people to really bring themselves to the material. And that absolutely had everything to do with respect, but a real concerted effort to listen. And that's so, I think listening can be hard in general, but we were on Zoom, our whole writer's room. And on top of that, we were trying to be funny and make jokes, and then your internet crashes or you get glitchy. And I think the fact that we had such an amazing group of writers who were also different and were able to advocate for the things that mattered to them, again, similar to what you're saying, Vivian, there were two other brown people. And so I didn't have to fight for everything, there was somebody else being like, no, that's not right, or do this. And that felt so freeing, and I could actually breathe easy. And yeah, I think that was the key. It was to really make space, bring all of yourself to it. And I noticed Fab a lot doing that same thing that you're talking about, Nathalie, about acknowledging when something wasn't said appropriately. And I thought that was also really important, because the onus was on him and not for, the people of color to be like, oh, hey, that thing was problematic. There was just a real, I don't know. I think there was something magical about that space and how open people were to risking and being real about when mistakes happen, which they do.
Well, I mean, I can just add a touch from my perspective, and obviously, my role in a writer's room historically had only ever been as a network representative, which I know you guys brings a completely different vibe. It's never lost on me when I would see an email, they'd be like, heads up, so-and-so's coming in bold letters, like I was some sort of oppressive presence, which I'm like, hilarious. That's hilarious to me. But I mean, maybe I am oppressive. Oh God, now I'm having an existential crisis about it. But I will say that two things that always stood out for me, and it is like an undercurrent of what everyone's saying, is about that leadership. And one thing that was always very clear when things are functioning is when they had some sort of map or organization that you could see. And I was like, okay, they're figuring their things out in a really methodical way. There was also times when I would go in and we'd be having conversations and like everybody would be chiming in, trying to answer any questions we had from the network. And I was like, okay, who's writing this? What's happening here? Like there was never really, there was sometimes situations where it was very clear that there was nothing underneath. There was no foundation underneath what I was looking at, right? So I think it was really key to, from a network's perspective, to come in and see that there was a leader that had really had a framework that all of these people were feeding into. So when a question came up, everybody in that room knew who the best person was to answer it. And then the other thing, and I don't know if this is something that just irked me, but there would often be times where we would give a note multiple times and it would maybe not get addressed or get addressed in a way that like didn't feel sufficient. And I could always sniff something broken if like the people who were handling that stakeholder feedback would immediately point in someone's direction. Oh, it was this person's fault. They're just not good at X, Y, and Z. And I'd be like, okay, well, something in that room is broken. Like if as a leader, you can't just take the lump for your team and be the person who's like, okay, I will absorb that and I will correct it within my unit. Like, that was always a clear indication to me that a room was like sound and was working or wasn't working. And often alarm bells went on. I was like, okay, well, I am going to list all the writers in this room to take out for drinks when this is over to get the real tea on what was happening. So some people are on this call right now. But it definitely was an indication to me of if something was working or not working. So I don't have the writer's experience, but as an outsider who was somewhat involved in the mix, could sort of sense some of the characteristics of what was working and what was maybe not.
I think that's so fascinating to hear from like the broadcaster's perspective and like what you could sniff out in the room dynamics, from how people respond to notes. The thing that really strikes me, listen to everyone, is just like, I feel, and this is like totally unscientific and not research, but when you do have a room where there is more than one person who is queer or BIPOC or is coming from parts that are traditional or have traditionally been shut out, when there's more than one of us, like just the fact that the conversation can breathe a little more and be more authentic because you don't have that pressure of being the only one. And I also feel like part of it, like, you know, when I think about your show, Bilal, which I'm so excited about, I just feel like for some of us, we've been fighting for so long to get into the room that by the time we get into the room, we already know what it's like to be like talked over or to be silenced or to be disregarded, that we're not going to treat other, or yeah, that we're not going to treat each other like that, right? Like it's such a precious time to actually be in the room. And I just feel like there's such a different energy when there is more of us.
Oh, amazing. Well, let's talk about that more. So we talked about like creating a good environment. And so what are some of the things that the industry could be doing better? Or what are some of the things that we could be doing more for screenwriters at this point? And I'll start with Vivian on this.
I mean, I think that Writers Guild diversity workshop, and there's various versions of that. Like I think BIPOC is doing their intensive boot camps and stuff like that. Like I think that training session is important, and it's not just because, like, I think yes, it's about writing and like it's providing access to writers to understand what industry writing looks like, but it's also to put them in a room. Like I think for me it was like life-changing because I'd never been in a room. I'd literally never been in a professional setting with another Asian person in my career. So it was like oh my God, you like, and it was just like a different, and so the way you think of stories and the way you approach things, it opens a door and it opens in your brain creatively. And then I think part of it is I'm on a rant. Part of it is like I still think there's code switching. I think there's still like you need to present the information in a way that executives know how to understand information. So like the way regardless, like everything in our stories, right? We're trying to make a screen like something in words, but for screen. So there's a translation there. And I think so much of our stories, you know, the missing link is how to make that, how to pitch that, how to present that in a way that makes sense for executives. And so that's it's not necessarily in the someone needs story skills or someone's unqualified or someone's whatever. It's like you really need the bridge to translate. And that to me, so the biggest thing is like not training up writers. It's like tell them how to tell the stories in a way that a network brain or producer brain can understand. So that to me is my little drama. So I pass it on to who am I going to pass it? I'm going to pass it on to Melanie.
I'll go. I am just chomping at the bit because Vivian, it is not you, it is them. And what you are talking about is like, okay. What you're talking about is what we do if we continue to make up, I love how I'm saying we. Forgive me. But if we continue to make up that distance, that little bit of separation between like the story that you want to tell, the intention that you have and what you think you're doing, and like, you know, just molding it in a way where you're like, this is going to get my point across. All we're doing is we're enabling this status quo. And if I got to wave a magic wand right now about like, what could the industry be doing better for content creators, for storytellers across the board? It's like, maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe it's the institution. Maybe it's the framework. Maybe it's all of those things. And I felt like, you know, in my time working at CBC, not calling them out because honestly, you guys, I gained so much there. It was an incredible experience. I just want to preface that a lot of great people work there. But I will say some of my job was like, sort of contextualizing different types of experience, contextualizing who this storyteller was that they'd never worked with before. And I was happy to do it, but I burned out doing it. And I left because I was like, I feel like I could serve storytellers maybe in a slightly different way within this industry. But then I definitely had this feeling of like, Well, that was crazy. Like, we are continuing to let these establishments continue to do things as they've always done things. And Lisa Jackson, I'm just gonna like totally rip off one of her incredible stories here, but give her full credit for it. She tells us amazing story about getting an elder to sign a submission release form for, or not a submission release form, like an appearance release form for a documentary. And the elder was like, well, what is it? Like, why don't you walk me through that? Why don't you tell me what this is? Why don't you read it to me? Explain it to me. And he said, why don't we just cross this out and we just write what we need? Like, just write what we say. Or they decided to agree, now I'm botching it, but they decided on a different agreement. And that it was that there was an agreement that made them both comfortable. I don't remember the details of the agreement, but essentially they made a new release that would capture their engagement. And I was like, oh my God, all of those things that we use, all of our license agreements, all of our incorporation documents, those are all reverberations of colonization. And what we're trying to do is ram ourselves into these systems. And I'm like, no, we should be holding those systems, and people do hold those, BIPOC TV and film, people like Penny Gummerson, like they are holding those systems accountable to maybe change the way that they evaluate talent and the way that they evaluate story. So that would be my magic wish in the way that we can serve screenwriters in this country. But in addition to that, it would just be generous. I think we hear these incredible success stories about, individuals who get shows, and you're like, oh my God, that could be me, that could be me. But it's like, can we actually just do a case study and pull those back and be really clear with people how they maybe got there? That would be really beneficial in setting people up and letting them know this is what you're in for. We hear these beautiful romantic stories of somebody getting a show greenlit off of a email, and you're like, okay, yeah, but what existed before the email? Like, what existed? Who was the email between? How did you get to write that email? So it's like there's this real veil of secrecy between success and failure, between the institution and the people who are trying to get in, right? So I'm like, I would also ask for generosity on both sides, but more specifically on the institution side. And I think I had like one more thing that it's just valuing other experience, because I feel like we all end up getting our education. I didn't go to school, guys. Obviously, I'm a little rough around the edges. But like, I didn't go to no fancy school, but I could hang with people who did, because I ended up getting my education on this industry and how it works a slightly different way. But it's still as valuable, and I'm still a badass leader and a badass problem solver. So I think we should really reevaluate how we are looking at people's skill set and how they got it. Sorry, guys, now I feel like I went on a diatribe, but let's hear from Nathalie.
I mean, everything that you said. I love that story that you just told about Lisa, like writing your own. It's true. Like, you read these documents, even our deal memos, and it's like, what does it say? I don't know. I'm just going to sign it because I just can't read it. Like, why do they have to use those huge lawyerly words? Like, we're not all lawyers, and then we don't have to pay lawyers to like read it to us. Yeah. I think just to add to what both Melanie and Vivian are saying, I think one thing that I really hope changes is this whole this pattern of people saying, I need an Indigenous consultant, and like, I need one of this to be the consultant, or, and it's like, why don't you just hire the people that you want to be consultants? Why don't you just hire them to create and write the story? Why don't you step aside, and why don't you become the one who helps bring that story forward? But it's not your story, and you don't need the writer credit, you don't need the creator credit. Like, just hand it over. That's my one thing. Bilal.
I feel like I'm going to be a broken record saying how new all of this really is for me. But one thing I feel really curious about is just, and maybe, I don't know, some guild already does this for writers, but to be connected, like cross nationally, like I would just love to know what other people are doing and writing and what those experiences are like. It kind of like this panel, but in a way more, like I just like casual, you know, hanging out, but swapping stories and tricks and tips on how to move through and get what we want and need. And I don't know, I'm kind of really hungry for that, but on a national level. And I know that also leans into the fact that I really don't know a lot of folks, but I'm hoping there's something like that out there, or will become something like that. I'm so curious to hear from Penny. I'm sure things have changed so much over some years.
Thank you, Bilal. What were you curious about has changed over the years?
Well, just around like what your experience has been around meeting other writers, working with other writers, or how different kinds of people have popped up over the years, if that's something that's true for your experience.
Sure. Well, yes, it has changed over the years. And Melanie, hi, thank you so much for that. I don't even know where to begin with that. Like I did struggle in the beginning because I was the only Métis writer in the room, or Indigenous writer, I guess, if you want to say. And I became the cultural consultant in the room sometimes. And I'm like, I'm not Dene, I don't know about that. Or I'm not Cree from Alberta. They have different colors on the medicine wheel than I do. I don't know. We're going to have to talk to elders from that area, you know, so that kind of thing. And I was also in a position for years where I was the consultant. And I finally had to say to my agent, I said, no more. Either they hire us or they don't write the story, because you can only consult so much. You can't get inside a story if you don't know that culture. You can write over it, but you can't get inside of it, you know? So it has changed over the years. I've seen more and more people of color come into the rooms, which makes me very, very happy. More diversity. I just find the stories so rich in every culture, you know, and it just adds to the storytelling. And we're not all experts in our culture. I remember I was working with a gentleman that was South Asian, an actor, and I was trying to do this ceremony, his kind of ceremony. And I was talking to my friend Pritika and her mom, and they had a certain ceremony to do. And I went to him and he said, oh, I don't know anything about that. I didn't grow up with that, right? So it's like, just to be respectful of that. I have found generally, like, there have been very good people. And when Melanie said, where did you start from? You know, you don't just get the phone call or that. People, I remember one time somebody said to me, oh, you're an overnight success in television and film. I think, wow, I've been writing since I was 19 years old. I've been a journalist. I've been a playwright. I've been an advertising copywriter, writing bad hot dog commercials, you know, and cruise ships, which I hate cruising, and I don't eat meat. And, you know, like, I've done everything and anything to survive over the years, and I've worked on my craft really hard. But just because you're maybe at a certain level in your writing, you need people to open up the doors. And I needed that. I remember when I got on to my first 1 hour show, and they said, you're not on the list. You're not on the CBC list. And I thought, oh, there's a list? Yeah, there is a list. This is way back. And that showrunner, Heather Conkey, she said, I don't care that Penny's not on the list. I like her writing. I like her writing sample. I want her in the room. And so, you know, she took a chance, right? And fought for me. And I appreciate that to this day. So I don't know if that helps answer anything. I feel very blessed with the people that I have worked with. I worked in, Karen Hill has been an amazing friend and confidant and mentor in many ways in navigating this world. Jordan Wheeler who's a Cree writer for Winnipeg. He took me under his wing right from the get-go. I still run everything by him. You know, Ian Weir, Patrick Tarr was just an amazing human being. Like in that room, Cardinal, the one of the bad guys was non-Indigenous. And I said, why can't she be an MP and be Indigenous from that area? And he said, of course she can, right? And then he allowed that to happen, and that was amazing. So, you know, kudos to those people. Yeah, I've had good people, and I've had people not so good that I've also learned from in ways I don't want to be, you know, and don't want to treat human beings ever. So goes both. That's life though, right? That's life. So thank you. Hope I didn't go on too much.
No, that's great. Actually, that leads me into another question. So I'm going to ask this in like two ways to give you all freedom. But when it comes to like stories are so important and they're such a responsibility. So when it comes to collaborating or, you know, maybe hiring writers to work on a story, what are some of the considerations that you take on? And I'll start with Bilal.
I just had a feeling you were going to ask me first.
Sorry.
No, that's good. It's good. My brain split in half as you were talking, and I want to just touch on two things quickly and then pass it on. But in answering that question directly, one thing that I was just so turned on by with a bunch of the writers in our room was their advocacy work, their community work, out like not writing related actually at all. There were I'm thinking about two of the writers who had kind of started these initiatives that were specifically for their communities, that was outside of writing and their kind of skill level, and that was important for me because it was important that I wanted to know that these people were actually tapped into a larger world, and it wasn't just about, you know, nailing how to start a cool cold open or something, and so that was actually really important, and then I think really fed into the process of the room really nicely, people who are connected to larger communities. And then the other thing I'll just say really quickly was just around, and I think it's worth talking about for so many of us here, around working with white folks specifically on a collaborative, deeply kind of intertwined process. And I know one of the things, and I don't know where the kind of foresight came to me, but before embarking on the journey working on the show with Fab, who's a cis male dude in his 40s, I had asked, what's your investment in the story? Like, where do you appear in this story, and where is your heart in it? And it just, I don't know what I was thinking, why I asked it, but what he came back with really started the kind of back and forth between us, and it really was a pure thing because we both had clear ideas about who we were and what we were doing and why we were in it together. And so then that took me out of the mindset of, oh, Fab looks at me like a bunch of dollar signs. No, I'm actually like a real person who has a heart, and so does he, and then we'll work together on this. Do you want to pass it on? Or I'm doing that? Okay, great. I would love to hear from Vivian.
Thanks, Bilal. It's the question's like, what do I look for in like staffing and all of that stuff? I think like I always want someone whose brain is the opposite of mine, just because when you're in the room and you're like looking at a problem or a story thing and you're just like, I don't know, all you want is someone who isn't thinking the same thing you are. So I try to just like get people, and it's like different experiences, different, like someone who's on TikTok, because I'm not on TikTok, just like anything and everything that I like. Are you judging me? I just am on TikTok. Okay. I mean, I'll watch it on YouTube or something, like, but just like anyone, you want like, I feel like you want your world to feel lived in all the time, right? So you want everyone to have like these really rich textures, and like, I'm a very boring person, so I really want really interesting people around me. And it's funny thing, like Bilal, to what you're saying, like how people just, as long as your kind of hearts connected on the same wavelength, And like, I remember going into like, you know, where you'll see these long sort of partnerships or collaborations between two writers who you're just like, how do you guys get a beer together? Like ever, like sometimes you'll just bump into like, oh, so-and-so have worked together. And like, that's how is just like, there is something about the heart or the, like the person that as long as you've got that, like all, you can talk about anything, right? And you can connect in so many ways. So those are sort of the same, to reiterate, it's like, those are the same things that I look for. I'm going to pass this to Nathalie.
Thanks. I've only really hired on the web series, so I can only really speak to that. I mean, people ask me a lot for a list of writers, and I'll always give like a mix. And and I think it's important that well, for the web series, for me, it was a comedy, and I feel like comedy is not my strength. So I was looking for people who were funny, funnier than me, which is a pretty low bar. But also, I wanted people who felt like they hadn't had a chance yet to be in a room, and I felt like if that was something that I could bring to them is give them a little mini room experience, and then have them come and attend however many meetings they can attend as we go into production and get a little bit of exposure in that way. Yeah, and then I recently got a little bit of funding for a pilot, and it allowed me to like get a few other writers. And for that one, I was looking at like who would understand the story and push me a little bit more in like structure, but also push me creatively and push me just with the cultural understanding, because like my understanding of the stories just from my perspective, and I wanted someone who could like make it a little bit deeper. Penny, passing it over to you.
I lost the question.
I'll tell you the question again. So just if you have any thoughts around, when you're hiring talent, or if you want to answer the question as when you're finding collaborators on stories. So either one of those.
I know there's a few questions coming in, so I'll keep this brief. I'll try to keep this brief. So what do I look for? I mean, I've only run a couple of rooms, so I can only speak to that. But every time I go to work on a series, I have an elder who says to me, oh, I wonder who you're supposed to meet this time. It's never about the show. It's never about the story. It's never about the writing. I wonder who you're supposed to meet this time. And I always meet one person, at least, who is either like-minded or somebody that I respect as a human being and as a writer. And then I think of them when I'm staffing a room. I think I like that. I mean, there's a lot of amazing, amazing writers, but if you're spending 10 hours a day, weeks on end, months on end, with the same 6, 7 people in a room, I want to be with good people, right? Not just good writers. I want to be with good people, people that are going to be respectful to one another, support one another. And that's very, very important to me. And to have fun. It's just a TV series, right? So like throw our minds together, our cultures together, and learn from each other and have fun. So I look for that. One thing I would just want to add to something else I heard. Rooms I've been in where people have come to me for maybe something cultural, or I've pitched a story idea, or we're talking about something cultural. I just want to put out there that it's really important to be sensitive to that when people are sharing those stories, and don't just think it's ripe for the taking. Like that story might be a story shared in the room, but I always ask, this happened to me recently with a young Indigenous writer, and she shared an amazing story that was great for the series. And I said, is that okay to share? And she said, I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to an elder and get back to you. And I said, great. Thank you for that. But to be respectful of that, and so, I start the room off with a smudge and a prayer. I don't make other cultures get into that with me. If you want to, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I want to start with a check-in. That's the way I've been brought up. Those are my teachings. So I pass the feather and say, how's everybody doing? Check in with writers, and they'll start talking about the show. And I'm like, no, not the show, you. How was your weekend? How are things? How's the family? How are things going? You know, like just get all that out so that then we can be together in a good way and be creative and have fun. So I think it's really, and with young writers, to really check in with them. It's scary coming into a room. You don't know anybody, you don't know the protocol, you want to be, you know, throwing out ideas, but you don't want to say too much. And so I think it's really important as a showrunner to talk with those young writers one-on-one and say, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And you're doing a great job. You're amazing. Thank you for being a part of the team. And not having to keep them there till 10 o'clock at night is always a good thing too. Go have a life. I had 2 showrunners in my entire career that said at the end of the day at 5 or 6 o'clock, thanks everybody for your work today. Go home and be with your families, right? And we would come back the next day refreshed and feeling amazing. So that's the end for me. I'm going to throw it back to you, Amber, because I think I just saw something come up that there's some questions or something.
Yeah, so we only have a couple minutes left. This has been incredible. So I'm just going to hit one of the Q&A questions. So what actionable steps do you have that you can suggest for a BIPOC writer who's just starting out with no experience to get into a room? And maybe we'll just start with Nathalie, and this is our last question here, so we're going to make it count.
Pressure. There's no easy answer to this. It's really like timing and relationships, right? Because you don't know, like by the time you hear about a show, it's been staffed. And although you know, we want to be able to say, and I said this all the time before I actually started getting paid to work, like I'll do anything, I'll do for free, but you shouldn't have to. Like there's enough money that you should be able, like production should be able to bring a writer in to observe and to participate and learn a little bit of ropes and give some money to do that. Like it's part of the training. 5 minutes remaining. Sorry, I don't have a good answer. Does
Can I
anyone else
jump
have
in?
Yeah.
Can I do one small jump in? And it's a kind of an unwritten thing, but this is a super social industry. So, you know, a lot of people can get in just like by sending their samples around and maybe having representation. But I really feel like my favorite thing was always getting people banging down my door and basically saying like, can I take you out for coffee? Can I take you out for coffee? And not only doing it on the network side, but doing it with producers. Really, it's like, it's proper pounding of the pavement. But it is like completely valuing the social aspect of the industry, because they'll only recommend who they know. And if they don't know you, they'll never recommend you. And sometimes they'll recommend you having never read you, but knowing you. So I really can't stress that enough. It's go to all of those free events, go to every networking event and ask people out for coffee and know what you're going to ask them when you get with them. And I also think build an ally that's already doing the thing. So if you watch a show in this country and you're like, wow, I love their tone, I love their take, I love whatever, and it's Penny Gummerson, mark my words, she'll return your call. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like other writers want to help other writers, generally speaking, especially if you open up with, I love that thing you did. So I would, those are my 2 hot takes.
Okay, does anyone else have any other last thoughts on that? Oh, it's silence.
I mean, yeah, like I feel like every writer I know will respond back to an email, right? Or like anytime that we're at an event or anything, it's always been the case where it's like, and I give my email sometimes a little too freely. So, but no, like I generally will, like if you're like, like I will try to help, like I'm right now, like if I can have a coffee, I'll have a coffee. It's the same with you. And we're always trying to. And if you come a little prepared, and what that means is, like, have you seen some of the shows? Do you know what the Canadian industry looks like? Does it look like you've ever picked up a playback? Do you know who showrunners are? Do you know why you're talking to me, right? It's not huge things. It's just like, I know then that like if I ask you for a sample, you've written one, like, and that like I can pass that to someone else, I'll know that you can do the work, because that's the thing is like, if I'm going to recommend you, I want you to be able to do the work, and that you have put in an ounce of like effort into like starting what that would be. So that's kind of my thing, I think.
I will quickly say this, that I have a movie script that's never ever been produced, that I wrote and rewrote and fine-tuned, and it's probably gotten me almost every series I've been on, that piece of writing. So write from your heart and rewrite and show it to people and get notes and make it better and bring yourself to it. You know, people read that script and it's like, yeah, that's Penny, right? Dysfunction, flawed characters, humor, the North, family. That's what you're gonna get, right? Character, they know I'll write character. So yeah, just get a story editor and write the best script of your life. That goes a long way too.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have, I guess, for this panel. And just want to thank everyone for sharing and for being here today. And it was really amazing listening to all of your wisdoms.